Excuse me. You cannot deny a mandatory HOA inspection. I demand access. Gloria Affinity, HOA president, full-time boundary invader, and self-appointed queen of Foxglove Summit, was standing at the foot of my gravel driveway mid-tantrum, flanked by two uncomfortable HOA volunteers. But before she could storm forward, my wife Sarah calmly lifted her badge. Actually, Sarah said, pulling a thin manila folder from under her arm, you are trespassing on federal property, and if you really want to talk, you'll need a warrant. She flipped the folder open. Gloria's face drained to a ghost white, because staring back at her was her own name printed neatly on top of an unsealed federal warrant. My name is Elliot Grange, quiet engineer, devoted cold brew addict, and the kind of guy who unwinds with Norwegian crime novels. My sanctuary was a small self-built cabin tucked deep in the forest edge of Foxglove Summit, a rustic community ruled with iron-fisted enthusiasm by an overzealous HOA. I kept to myself, paid dues on time, installed a composting toilet, and minded my own business. But that compost toilet apparently triggered the wrong kind of attention. Because Gloria Affinity, spiritual successor to Nurse Ratched, and the same woman who once fined a neighbor for hanging wind chimes in a, quote, emotionally aggressive manner, had just found her next obsession, cabins inspections. Mine was at the top of her clipboard, supposedly part of some quarterly rustic compliance initiative. I declined. She quoted bylaws. I told her to leave. Gloria responded by hiking up the ridge with binoculars and a digital thermometer, claiming she was checking for safety hazards. Then came the emails. We're concerned about mold. Some residents reported smoke smells. Do you house bees? What Gloria didn't know was that Sarah, my calm, sourdough-baking, succulent-reviving wife, worked for the U.S. Marshal Service. And she didn't tolerate bullies waving fake authority like magic spells. Everything escalated on a quiet Tuesday morning. Gloria marched up my driveway carrying what looked like a very official property assessment form, wearing the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. Elliot, we need to discuss your cabin's compliance status, she declared. I was on the porch, sipping coffee, watching two cardinals fight over birdseed. Exactly the kind of peace rural life is supposed to offer. What compliance status? I asked. She pulled out a laminated card that looked suspiciously homemade. I'm authorized under Section 12 of the Community Guidelines to conduct structural assessments. I had read those guidelines cover to cover when I bought the property. Section 12-2-4? Pool maintenance. About chlorine levels. Gloria, that's about swimming pools. It's been updated, she snapped, offended. Her audacity was almost inspiring. 2 days later, she returned with backup. Dennis, jittery and sweating, and a clipboard-wielding woman who looked like she regretted every decision that had brought her here. Elliot, we've received multiple complaints about your cabin, Gloria announced. I was replacing a loose board on my deck. Apparently suspicious behavior in Gloria's universe. What complaints? Dennis cleared his throat. Well, unusual sounds. Unusual sounds? Gloria cut in quickly. Hammering at odd hours. Loud music. Possible illegal construction. The hammering? Me fixing the deck they were standing on. The loud music? Norwegian folk songs played at normal volume. The illegal construction? A bird feeder I had hung last month. But Gloria wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and began snapping photos like she'd discovered a crime scene. Is this structure permitted? She demanded, pointing at my legally built, fully inspected cabin. Yes, Gloria. I showed you the permits last year. She ignored me. And this composting toilet? Are you sure it meets county standards? It was installed by a licensed contractor and passed 3 inspections, I replied. She scribbled aggressively. We'll need to verify that. The clipboard woman whispered something to Dennis. Dennis nodded like a defeated hostage. Suddenly, I understood why the previous HOA president had fled to Florida. Things escalated once more when Gloria widened her search beyond my property. She began questioning neighbors about suspicious behavior from my cabin. Mrs. Patterson, across the trail, said Gloria had asked about strange odors and fire hazards. The strange odors? My morning coffee and the occasional grilled cheese. The fire hazards? My perfectly well-maintained fireplace. Then came the night visit. I was reading in my living room when I heard footsteps on my porch. Through the window, I saw Gloria shining a flashlight through my curtains. When I opened the door, she jumped back like a teenager caught sneaking home. "Oh, Elliot, I was just checking for carbon monoxide leaks," she stuttered. She was holding what looked suspiciously like a TV remote. "Gloria, it's 9:30 at night. Emergency inspections can happen any time under the new safety protocols," she insisted. "What protocols?" "The ones approved at last emergency board meeting." There had not been an emergency board meeting. I knew that. I actually read the minutes. The breaking point came when she enlisted her grown son, Trevor, for enhanced surveillance. Trevor, who looked like he'd rather be gaming, set up a folding chair at the edge of my property and sat there with binoculars for hours. "Monitoring compliance activities," he muttered. "And that means what exactly?" He shrugged. "Mom says I gotta watch for code violations." "What violations?" He read from a laminated sheet. "Unauthorized modifications, improper waste disposal." And, he squinted. "Excessive bird attraction." I stared. One bird feeder. Apparently the forest could not handle that level of chaos. And then came the final straw. Gloria showed up unannounced the following week, clipboard in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. And this time, Sarah met her at the base of the driveway. Gloria hadn't come alone. She brought with her Dennis, the clipboard woman, and 2 new recruits I'd never seen before. What showed up in front of my driveway didn't look like an HOA inspection. It looked like a discount invasion force. Gloria stood at the front, barking orders like a general who'd watched too many courtroom dramas. "Elliot, we need immediate access for a mandatory safety inspection," she demanded. Sarah stepped forward, still in her Marshal Service work clothes, posture calm but razor sharp. "Ma'am," Sarah said evenly, "do you have a warrant?" Gloria laughed, a short, confident, delusional cackle. "This is my jurisdiction. I don't need a warrant." Sarah said nothing. She simply turned and walked inside. She returned moments later holding a slim file she'd been quietly keeping for months. Because what Gloria didn't understand was that Sarah didn't just work for the U.S. Marshals, she excelled at it. When people like Gloria start wielding fake authority to intimidate and control others, Sarah notices. And months earlier, out of sheer curiosity, she'd run Gloria's name through the system. The results were enlightening. 3 years ago, Gloria had used her HOA president title to create a fake business license in a nearby county. She pretended to be a government official to help someone bypass legal licensing procedures. Sarah had forwarded that to a federal identity fraud task force. And just this week, that old case had resurfaced, complete with an active federal warrant for impersonating a government official. The federal government takes that seriously, very seriously. It's not a rule violation, it's a felony. Sarah had copies of everything. Forged documents, counterfeit seals, and emails where Gloria proudly signed as County Licensing Coordinator. It was the kind of airtight evidence prosecutors dream of. Gloria's transformation was immediate. She went from iron-spined HOA dictator to panicked suburban mom in 3 seconds flat. That's not. I was helping the community," she stammered, voice cracking on the word community. Sarah remained calm and professional. "Ma'am," she said, "you represented yourself as a county official to approve a contractor's license. That is a federal crime." Her volunteers immediately began retreating like she'd announced she was infectious. Dennis looked like he was about to pass out. "I was just helping Bob start his landscaping business." Gloria protested weakly. Sarah lifted her phone. "By falsifying government documents to do it." Gloria's bolt cutters slipped from her hand and hit the gravel with a sharp clatter, like punctuation on the end of her career. But she wasn't done. She tried one last desperate pivot. "This is harassment. You're abusing your position to intimidate a volunteer." Sarah's smile was small but devastating. "Ma'am, I'm off duty. This is a citizen's arrest based on an active federal warrant." She held up the paperwork. "You have the right to remain silent." Gloria's face went through an entire patriotic palette: red, white, and a nauseous shade of green. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." Sarah was already calling for backup. "That's not a real position of authority, ma'am. And even if it were, federal law outranks HOA bylaws." The next 20 minutes felt surreal. Gloria alternated between demanding Sarah's supervisor, insisting everything was a misunderstanding, and claiming she'd never impersonated a county official. Sarah read from an email. "Here you signed as Gloria Affinity, County Licensing Coordinator. That position doesn't exist and you don't work for the county." "I was just streamlining the process," Gloria pleaded. "You charged someone $300 for a license application you had no authority to handle," Sarah replied. "Yes." Gloria had been running an entire side hustle, using her HOA title to scam people into thinking she had government clearance. When the sheriff finally arrived, Gloria made one last attempt to redirect blame. "This is about my cabin inspections. She's retaliating because I found violations." Deputy Collins, a patient man, glanced at the warrant, then at Gloria. "Ma'am, this is from 3 years ago. Has nothing to do with anyone's cabin." Gloria opened and closed her mouth like a malfunctioning goldfish. But Collins was already reaching for his cuffs. "Ma'am, you need to come with me." And that's when Gloria completely unraveled. "This is unconstitutional. I demand a lawyer. I demand to speak to the real authorities." Sarah, who literally was the real authority, simply watched as Gloria was guided into the back of the patrol car. Gloria kept yelling about deepfakes, conspiracies, and government plots involving compost toilets. But Sarah had everything: body cam footage, timestamps, and even a witness statement from a former HOA treasurer, now running a dog walking service called Snitch and Fetch. By the time the sheriff drove off, Gloria was still shouting about constitutional violations and deep state gardening equipment. At the next HOA meeting, live-streamed because the entire neighborhood demanded it, I gave a small presentation called "Boundaries, Warrants, and Why You Don't Harass Married Men in the Woods." Sarah sat beside me, calmly knitting a scarf that read BYOB, "Bring Your Own Badge." Gloria resigned immediately, tearful, dramatic, and incredibly overdue. The new HOA president introduced a single, community-approved rule: if the property has no smoke, bees, or bodies, leave it alone. The room erupted in applause. Gloria pled down to community service and 2 years probation. Ironically, she was assigned to clear trail overgrowth behind my cabin. Sarah would sometimes wave from the porch. The woman who spent 3 years trying to inspect my composting toilet was now picking up literal garbage in full view of it. The irony hit her hard. The first time she saw Sarah, she turned tomato red and nearly fainted. "This is humiliating," she whispered to her supervisor. Sarah simply smiled, tightened her yarn, and went back to knitting. And that's how it all came crashing down for Gloria Affinity, the self-appointed queen of the HOA who believed clipboards and fake authority could outrank the law itself. In the end, it wasn't anger or confrontation that stopped her. It was the truth, the law, and a long-overdue reality check delivered by someone who actually knew what authority looked like: Sarah. Watching Gloria hauled away, shouting about conspiracies and compost toilets, was the moment Foxglove Summit collectively exhaled. Years of petty tyranny, intimidation, and midnight inspections were finally over. And as the new HOA leadership rebuilt trust, peace returned. For the first time in a long while, neighbors could enjoy their cabins without fear of surprise flashlights or bogus safety protocols. And the irony? The woman who tried to police everyone else's property ended up doing community service right behind mine, picking up trash in full view of the composting toilet she obsessed over. Karma doesn't miss. If you've ever had to deal with a power-hungry neighbor, an out-of-control HOA, or someone who thought rules didn't apply to them, drop your story in the comments. I read every one, and your experience might appear in a future episode. If you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget, like the video, comment your own neighbor war. Share it with someone who needs a laugh. Subscribe to Neighbor Wars HQ for more real stories where justice hits back harder than any HOA ever could. Because here at Neighbor Wars HQ, the battles are real, and the karma is undefeated.